Welcome to Food Talk for Health, because you really are what you eat. Here is your host, Tonia King.
My guest today is Dr. Annie Fenn, and today we're talking about the brand new book, The Brain Health Kitchen. Annie, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
What a beautiful book.
The art department did an amazing job. My publisher, Artisan Books, makes beautiful cookbooks.
Tell me why you did the book, The Brain Health Kitchen.
Alzheimer's prevention has been my focus for about the last 15 years. I'm actually an obstetrician gynecologist, and I practiced OBGYN for more than 20 years. And in 2010, I decided to do something different. I was just itching to use a different part of my brain. And I'd always been a home cook and a passionate lover of good food. So I decided to go to culinary school. When I came back from culinary school, I became very interested in the intersection between food and health. Even as an OBGYN, I really felt like a lot of the conditions my patients were suffering with had the root cause as poor diet and lifestyle. So I started to study the impact of diet on certain chronic diseases. And then in 2015, my mother was diagnosed with an early stage of Alzheimer's disease. And I really took a deep dive into all the scientific literature about what to eat to prevent cognitive decline. And that's how I started Brain Health Kitchen.
It's such an important thing to be thinking about. Most people don't think about how their diet really impacts their health.
True. And we're starting to see more awareness since the pandemic that, yes, poor nutrition is associated with an immune system that doesn't function as well. And when you get sick, you could get actually sicker. But it's very pertinent to the discussion of long-term brain health. And Alzheimer's and other types of dementias are really going up in this country and all over the world. We're starting to see more cases of it, mostly because of our aging population and the poor nutrition that a lot of people follow.
Well, what has your research found regarding the foods that we should be thinking about putting into our body?
Well, it's all good news, especially for people that love food like you and I do. There is a lot of data to show that spin-offs of the Mediterranean style diet are actually the most brain protective ways of eating. And we have studies showing that one such dietary pattern called the MIND diet, the MIND diet, which is taken from the Mediterranean diet, can reduce the risk of getting Alzheimer's later in life by as much as 53%.
That's pretty incredible. What do you include in that diet?
Yeah, it's absolutely astounding. I mean, first of all, we don't have a cure for Alzheimer's. We have some drugs that show promise, but we don't really have anything to treat the disease. So I like to say that prevention is the cure, and that's where we should be putting most of our efforts. And the dietary pattern is really simple. The Mind Diet researchers broke it down into 10 brain healthy food groups and 5 food groups to limit or avoid. And in my book, I changed these up a little bit to update the scientific knowledge. But mostly these are the things that you would expect would be good for you, like vegetables, leafy greens, whole grains, nuts and seeds, fish and seafood, beans and legumes. Things like that are the predominant makeup of the brain healthy diet.
So it sounds like a whole food plant-based diet is the way to go.
It's a whole food plant-based diet, but not strictly vegan in that sense. So there are lots of different opinions about how much animal products you should include in your brain healthy dietary pattern. The truth is, nobody really knows if being 100% plant-based is better than being 90% plant-based. And the reason for this is that the one food group, fish and seafood, is so crucial for brain health that I would be hard-pressed to leave that out. But if someone is fully plant-based, you can take omega-3 supplements to make up some of the difference.
Yeah, I can see adding fish being so important. And yet, though, we have to really think about the fish that we are including in our diet, right? Just because of mercury and other things that could contaminate the fish from the waters that they're in.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good point. In my book, each chapter covers a different food group. And I have an overall brain health dietary pyramid with the breakdown of the different food groups and the serving sizes. And then within each chapter, I have its own individual pyramid. So for the fish and seafood chapter, I looked at the fish pyramid from the viewpoint of, okay, what are the fish and seafood products that are going to be most sustainable, number one, because we know that our oceans are getting depleted and we have to be very careful about our seafood choices. Number two, how do we minimize our exposure of environmental toxins? When it comes to the brain, mercury is probably the most pertinent one. And then number three, what are the fish and seafood that have the most DHA and EPA? These are the omega-3 fatty acids that you find especially in cold water fish that have been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's and even repair brain cells as they get older. So I definitely came to my fish and seafood chapter from all of those viewpoints.
And what have you found to be the fish that meet that criteria?
Well, I would love it if people would really embrace the little fish, for the environment and also for DHA, EPA, and the lowest risk of environmental toxins. The little fish like sardines, anchovies, mackerel, herring, these are the fish that are going to be the most bang for your buck when it comes to brain health. After that, I would love people to embrace shellfish. A lot of them are sustainably farmed, like mussels and clams and oysters, and they also provide good amounts of D and EPA as well as selenium, while having very low amounts of environmental toxins. So those are two of the little known seafood groups that I would really love people to eat more of.
Tell me your opinion about farm-raised versus wild.
Well, when it comes to salmon, now salmon is a great food for your brain. It provides the omega-3 fatty acids. It also provides vitamin D. It's a lean source of protein. And also there's some data that's showing that older adults should be eating more protein as they get older to fend off dementia. So I'm a big fan of eating salmon. I almost always choose wild caught salmon if it's available because it has a very low accumulation of environmental toxins. And so you get all of those brain health benefits without any of the disadvantages. The other thing about wild caught salmon, especially if it comes from Alaska, there are stringent regulations as to the fishing of the oceans there. And so you know that you're getting a product that's highly regulated.
That's a really good feeling to know that there are regulations.
Yes, and that being said, if you're looking at a restaurant menu and salmon is on the menu, chances are, unless it says wild caught, it's going to be a farmed salmon. And it may be a better choice in terms of your overall brain health and your meal than some of the other things on the menu. So it's not that farmed salmon is completely off the table, but it does have lower amounts of these healthy fats. And depending on where it comes from, it may or may not have accumulated some toxins or parasites.
Well, it really does just go back to the whole education part of things and being conscientious about what you choose for your diet.
Yes, and I have found with my research that a little bit of knowledge goes so far when it comes to long-term brain health. I mean, eating from the Mediterranean dietary pattern, which the Mayan diet basically is so joyful. I mean, I come to this from the viewpoint of a home cook who's also a doctor, but I really want people to enjoy their food. That's why I wrote the book as a cookbook first. And it's also a guide to taking care of your brain, which is really important. But I wanted people to be enticed by the beautiful dishes, how easy they are, how the ingredients are really easy to source, and how a little bit of knowledge goes such a long way. Like I do have a chapter on meat, chicken, and eggs. And this is the one chapter where sourcing is extremely important.
I also noticed in one chapter of your book, you have a few reasons why Alzheimer's targets women. That's interesting. What did you find there?
Yeah, my interest in brain health was actually sparked back when I was a gynecologist. I practiced menopausal medicine for the last 8 years of my practice. I had given up delivering babies and I was focused primarily on menopausal medicine. And I had women coming in and describe their symptoms at menopause, really, really concerned that they were getting some sort of dementia. I mean, not a day went by in my office that I didn't hear, Annie, I think I'm getting Alzheimer's. Well, it's not Alzheimer's at that age when you're going through menopause, but the cognitive symptoms are very similar. So now, fast forward 10 or 15 years, there's a lot of scientific research going into this. Why do women have cognitive deficits around the time of perimenopause? And how is this related to Alzheimer's disease later? What we're finding is the menopausal transition is actually a vulnerable period for women's brains. And some women actually can start that path towards an environment that could welcome Alzheimer's later at menopause.
So no specific things to stay away from or to add to our diet or lifestyle.
Well, there are a lot of things that are being investigated. Number one, the role of hormone therapy in women at menopause. There seems to be some women that will really benefit from that, especially those who have a genetic variant for Alzheimer's disease. The other issue, of course, is diet. What I'm finding with the brain healthy diet, which is basically low on the glycemic index scale, it's designed to keep your blood sugar from going up and your insulin from spiking and the development of diabetes later, which is associated with Alzheimer's too. So during menopause, these are all very important factors. Eating for a stable blood sugar, eating mostly whole plant foods, choosing strategic amounts of nutrient dense fish and seafood and maybe meat and eggs, and staying away from ultra processed foods, fast foods, fried foods, pastries and sweets, all of those things.
Sounds like that particular diet will help a variety of different things, Alzheimer's, diabetes, or whatever. It just sounds like a nice, healthy way to think about eating.
You know, it's funny when you look at the science, this brain health diet really does draw in a lot of the chronic diseases that, people suffer from in the US and around the world. When I was practicing medicine, I would talk to my patients until I was blue in the face about eating a healthy diet so they wouldn't get high blood pressure or diabetes or things like that. When I started talking about brain health, people really started to pay attention. And I think the reason is people are very concerned about losing their cognitive faculties as they get older, even more concerned than they are of getting diabetes or getting heart disease.
Wow. One thing I do want to bring up or ask you about that is just a slight variance from the food diet thing. I've always heard that aluminum is a real problem in deodorant for Alzheimer's. Have you found anything out about that in your research?
Yeah, aluminum used to be proposed to be linked to Alzheimer's disease, but studies have shown that it is not a factor. It is true that certain heavy metals will deposit in brain cells in the victims of Alzheimer's, but this may be because of the disease, not so much of the aluminum. Of course, I wouldn't really use aluminum coated pans in this day and age. There's a lot of other pans with better surfaces like nonstick ceramic and things like that. Even cast iron is better. But we don't need to really be afraid of aluminum. Like I use aluminum foil on the grill. If I had an aluminum pan, I probably wouldn't worry too much about it. But most of my pans are of different metals at this point.
Well, that's good. Let's get back to the food now. I want to talk about some of these delicious recipes that you have in here. Can you share a couple with us?
Oh, absolutely. So, like I said, each chapter is a different food group. And, it's interesting, but the berries are the only fruit that is recognized as being preventive of Alzheimer's and other types of dementias. So I have a whole chapter on berries. One dish that I made yesterday for my kids who are visiting me is the whole grain blackberry and blueberry cornbread. So a lot of the things I do in the Brain Health Kitchen is I take foods that are like nostalgic and crave-worthy, maybe some of the foods that you grew up with, like a blueberry cornbread, and then I totally remake them with brain healthy ingredients. And with the baking ingredients, one thing I might do is I might take out the all-purpose white flour and then just add nutrient-dense flours like almond flour or buckwheat flour or other types of nut flours, upgrade from all-purpose wheat. And then I change out the sugar content. Most baked goods, you can reduce the sugar significantly and still get a really, really delicious product. And so I like to use natural forms of sugar over refined white. So this cornbread recipe uses just a small amount of maple syrup, and it's not as sweet as you might expect a cornbread to be, but I really like that because all the sweetness comes from the berries. And then I use olive oil instead of butter. One of the things that is really important in a brain healthy diet is to use olive oil whenever possible in your baking or your cooking instead of other fats that are higher in saturated fats like butter or margarines or coconut oils, things like that. So that's a recipe that I highly recommend. It's really easy. And it makes really good use of whole grain cornmeal, which is a delicious brain healthy product as well.
That sounds great.
Oh, another one that's really easy now that the farmers markets are in full swing. We're coming home with all of these berries. You can make a really easy chia seed berry jam. And all you need to do is take your berries and put them on the stove and then stir in a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of maple syrup if you want, maybe just a teaspoon or two, and some chia seeds. And chia seeds plump up like tapioca. And so you can have this jam within a few minutes that you can make it on the stove with very little sugar and all the goodness of the berries. And chia seeds have potent antioxidants. So in addition to their ability to like turn berries into jam, they actually are really good for you too.
Wow. And what berries are you using in that jam?
You can use blueberries, you can use blackberries. I've tried it with raspberries. Where I live, we pick huckleberries in the summer, which
Oh,
are a wild form of blueberries. And if I get enough huckleberries, I really like to make this jam as well.
boy, that sounds great. That sounds great. How about one for dinner? What would be a good dinner choice?
Oh gosh, one of my favorite dinners is to make it's a salmon recipe. It's called slow roasted salmon with avocado butter. Now I'm always trying to create recipes that are easy for people to make. I know people don't have a lot of time to cook, yet I want them to use whole food ingredients and not use processed foods, right?
Right.
So this is a great dinner party dish because you can assemble it ahead of time and put it in the oven at a very low temperature. What you do is you chop up some vegetables, like fennel is one of my favorites, and you
Me
save the
too.
fennel fronds for later. Put in a can of chickpeas. You can make them from scratch, just garbanzo beans or chickpeas, and you strew that on a sheet pan with the fennel, and you lay the salmon fillets or half of a side of salmon on top. And then you drizzle it with olive oil, you add some water to the pan, you put that in the oven at a very low temperature, about 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you cook salmon at a low temperature, it helps retain all of those healthy fats and nutrients we were talking about. And then while that's in the oven, you take good butter. I like grass-fed butter, usually a European product because they're higher in omega-3 fatty acids as well, and mix it with avocado and garlic and lemon juice. So you have this beautiful avocado butter that goes on top. And then right before the salmon comes out of the oven, you throw in a few handfuls of frozen peas, which makes it really bright. It adds a nice sweet element to the dish. And then you can serve it right from the sheet pan. It's that pretty.
That sounds really delicious. And the avocado butter is so interesting. Never thought about doing that. There's so many different compound butters, but I never thought about using avocado.
My approach to healthy eating is a little different than other people's. I'm not so austere. Like, I'm not saying don't ever eat butter, don't ever use sugar. I have a whole grain chocolate chunk cookie that I tried a million different ways, and it was really just better if I used dark brown sugar, small amount, but it made the difference between like a great cookie and a good one. So I have sort of this hybrid way of cooking where I'm using a little bit of butter, I'm using some sugar, I'm using things like that really add to the food and say the texture of baked goods or the flavor of the food. But the brain healthy diet in general wants you to limit your sugars, limit foods that are high in saturated fats. But that doesn't mean they have to be zero. You can enjoy some butter. And a compound butter is a brilliant way to do that.
It really is. You're just so practical. That's what I love about it. You're just practical in your approach.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I've been a home cook forever. So I draw on my experience as a busy doctor coming home from a 12 or 14-hour day at the office and feeding my family. And, 6 o'clock at night, staring down at the stove and the fridge, going, what am I going to make that's, not processed, not junk, that everyone will actually eat? So a lot of my recipes come from that point of view.
We are talking with Dr. Annie Fenn about her brand new book, The Brain Health Kitchen. Do you want to give me one more before we head out?
Oh, sure. So we could talk about chicken a little bit. Chicken is actually one of the brain healthy food groups in the Mind Diet study. And it's kind of controversial whether or not you should eat chicken in a brain healthy diet. But it does provide really good lean protein, like I said, is important for older adults, also lutein and choline. But the key thing with chicken is to use cuts that are lower in saturated fat and to cook them very gently. The cooking techniques I use in the book are cooking techniques that are more low and slow rather than searing something in a hot pan. So one thing I like to do is to grill chicken on the low zone of the grill and also use a marinade. So if you use a marinade with your meat or your chicken, it actually reduces a lot of the inflammatory particles that get created during cooking. But one recipe I really love for right now, because there's broccolini at the markets and we're still grilling, is chicken with grilled broccolini and another compound butter, anchovy butter. So just
Wow.
like with the avocado butter, you can take a small amount of butter, mix it with anchovies and garlic and lemon, and that's going to be delicious on top of the grilled chicken. And I take chicken breasts and cut them in the middle so that you're opening them up like a book. And then I slather butter inside the chicken before it goes on the grill. That's one way to cook a leaner type of chicken, chicken breast, and still have it come out really juicy and delicious. Broccolini on the grill, chop up a tomato, make a tomato bread like they do in Spain, the pan de tomate, and it just makes like a full dinner that you can have ready in, under half an hour.
I'm a big anchovy fan. Never thought about using it in a compound butter. How cool is that?
Anchovies have such a great depth of flavor. They add umami to so many things. If someone is new to these little fish that I really want you to introduce in your diet, one way to enjoy them is in a sauce, like a marinara sauce. So if you saute the anchovies at the point where you're sauteing, maybe onion or garlic and olive oil, they actually will start to dissolve into the oil. And no one will even know that the anchovies are in your sauce, but all of those healthy nutrients will be there. And they'll also add depth of flavor. So it's a win-win for brain health and enjoying food.
It's so funny that you just said that, because one of my staple dishes that my husband and I love, I do just garlic, anchovies, olive oil with linguine. Fresh
That's
herbs.
a brilliant dish.
Part of my upbringing,
I do the
obviously.
same thing, and I chop up broccoli really small so that it cooks quickly.
Yes. We're talking with Dr. Annie Fenn about her brand new book, The Brain Health Kitchen. How do we find you on social media?
Oh, well, you can find me on Instagram at Brain Health Kitchen, on TikTok at Brain Health Kitchen. I also have a website, brainhealthkitchen.com, where there are over 100 free recipes. And I also have a newsletter on Substack. This is brainhealthkitchen.substack.com. And I write to my newsletter community twice a week. I'm still coming up with new recipes all the time. But the newsletter is really updating everyone on the research of what's going on in the brain health world, what you need to know about taking care of your brain, but all doing it in sort of a light and proactive way. So we have a really fun Brain Health Kitchen community happening over on Substack. I would love for people to join me.
That is just so exciting. Thank you so much for your time today, Annie.
Great speaking with you. I love being on the show. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Food Talk for Health with Tonia King. Thanks for joining us. Eat well to be well.